3-game set. This guy will be on the scene at Oriole Park at Camden Yards for a first-place August matchup in some pennant race baseball. But on Monday night, he was at the Raven Stadium watching what became quite a chippy practice and sort of an interesting night of football down at the stadium on a stormy Monday night. Luke Jones joins us live via satellite here to discuss all things fights. I don't know what else there's to say. If people had a videotape of Monday night, and I know the fans were there, and there weren't many of them there, way chippier than John Harbaugh wants it to be. And, I don't think we've ever seen John Harbaugh quite as animated as he was with Zadarius Smith, have we?
Well, I've seen him animated before over the years, but not often. I mean, it was pretty rare in that regard. But, it was as physical, heated, chippy, spirited, however you want to describe it. And, look, in the grand scheme of things, nothing took place on Monday night that was that big of a deal. All the different skirmishes were squashed. There was a couple, one Dennis Pitta against Kamale Correa, and then even Joe Flacco got in the rookie linebacker's face after he popped Mike Wallace. So players thought, a little overzealous from the rookie linebacker, but in some ways, I think the Ravens need some of that after coming off of a 5-11 season. I like guys being a little uncomfortable during training camp. I like guys being a little heated. You don't want to see anyone get hurt, and Dennis Pitta sprained his finger in the skirmish, which not a big deal, and as Joe Flacco quipped like no one else would quip about it, at least he didn't break his hip, as he said after the practice.
Joe, come on.
Well, it's Joe.
That's Joe being Joe, is what he is.
Hilarious exchange. But overall, John Harbaugh preached this after practice, and he said this to Zadarius Smith and Ryan Jensen during practice, that there's a fine line between being aggressive, playing to the whistle, and putting your team in jeopardy when you're in a real game situation. It's one thing to get in a little bit of a skirmish at practice. It's one thing for Zadarius Smith to take a swing at Jensen, who, by the way, is a regular culprit in some of these training camp skirmishes we've seen over the last couple of years, considering he hasn't been in Baltimore that long. But overall,
he's the usual suspect, huh?
Yeah. Ja Reed was one of those guys in the past, as far as my years covering this team. But there's a fine line between mixing it up a little bit, being aggressive, just the spirit of competition out there, and understanding that you can only go so far with it, or you're going to cost your team in a live game situation. And in the case of Dennis Pitta, you don't want to see him certainly get hurt. Wasn't a major issue, but at the same time, you see that there can be some fallout from that. But really, really a chippy practice. And I'll be totally honest with you, most of the time the stadium practices are boring. They are. I know it's nice for the fans to get an opportunity to see the team, but I typically can't say that I've ever been to a stadium practice that was all that memorable. That was a memorable one on Monday night.
Well, Luke, we're down there, and we're trying to figure out who's running first team, who's running second team. But I think the obvious observation, and, look, we're 4 days into this, 5 days into this.
Right. Joe
Flacco looks pretty good, man. Like, you just look up, and he's slinging it. Not that we should expect him not to be throwing the ball that well, but he's even kind of moving around. He even took off at one point and sprinted for a first down. And again, it's practice. Again, he hasn't been hit. But psychologically, from where I sit up in the stands and have watched him do this for a number of years, there's nothing about it that looks kind of awkward or uneven, I would say, at this point.
He looks like Joe Flacco. I'm not ready to say that he's going to have a career season. I just don't know that right now. There's so many questions as far as some of his weapons right now, even from a health standpoint. But as it relates to his knee, there's no lingering issues there whatsoever, other than the fact that he's wearing a red non-contact jersey, which other quarterbacks wear black jerseys, and he has a knee brace on. Other than that, you'd never know he was hurt. As you mentioned, he took off the 3rd and 4 situation in 11-on-11 team drills and rolled out of the pocket and ran upfield. Now, he didn't look like Michael Vick or Cam Newton or any great scrambling quarterback you can think of, but he looked like Joe Flacco doing it, which, we know Joe can move around a little bit. That's always been an understated part of his game, that he does have just enough mobility more so than some other quarterbacks his size in this league. But he looked good doing it. So, we asked him about it after practice, and he said, well, what'd you guys think? I've been running around like this for a couple months now. Did I look like me? And he did. And the other thing, I asked him about this because the one thing he had talked about going back to June, going back to the eve of training camp when we first heard from him this summer, was getting back into the pocket and just, the psychological, the mental part of being in the pocket, remembering how he got hurt last year, and just seeing how he would respond to that. And he said it was interesting. He thought that he might think about it a little bit, but he said he got through the very first practice, and there were about 15 minutes left in that first practice, talking last Thursday, and it was a 2.5-hour session, 2.5-hour session, and he kind of took a step back for just a moment and said, hey, I haven't thought about my knee at all, and I'm almost through my first practice. So it kind of just shows where his mindset is. He seems like someone who is completely thinking about football. He's not thinking about his knee. Does that mean that there won't be a time where he's thinking about it? I'm sure he'll have some times where he's a little stiff and sore, and he's acknowledged that, but it's not something that's hindering, one, his return to being back to where he was, and two, just his regular preparation for the 2016 season.
Well, and he also hasn't needed a day off because of fluid or this or that or anything weird. So to see him out there on the fifth day doing it like that, soreness is kind of wearing off for a lot of the guys at this point who probably came in pretty good shape. This is a really encouraging sign 10 days before the first preseason game.
It is, and it doesn't mean that he won't have a time where he needs to take a day. In fact, the Ravens, perhaps they have it planned out that they're going to give him a day at some point here over the next few days. They're non-committal about playing him in the first preseason game, but that doesn't mean they won't play him in the first preseason game. So I just think, for all the questions that they have about guys like Steve Smith and Terrell Suggs and Brashad Perriman, and those are valid questions, whether those individuals want to hear that or not. Those are fair questions as far as what they're going to be physically for this team in 2016, and certainly Perriman on a different end of the spectrum from Suggs and Smith. But we've said, first and foremost, it's paramount for Joe Flacco to be himself. It's paramount for him to be healthy. If he's not, then everything else we're talking about kind of becomes eyewash. It doesn't really matter if you don't have a healthy starting quarterback. So
you get no shot of winning 12 games if Flacco's not healthy.
Exactly. Yeah. You can debate whether the Ravens are an 8-win team, a 9-win team, or 11-win team, but if Joe Flacco's not there, I'm not even sure 8 wins is even remotely in the conversation. So it's good to see him where he is physically right now. It doesn't mean that there won't be some challenges here over the next 6 weeks and then into the regular season. But as far as where it stands 5 days into this thing, I don't think you could ask for more, considering this guy is still just under 8 months removed from ACL reconstruction surgery.
Luke Jones will be on the scene at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, as well as the backfields all week long, doing some double duty here in the middle of the week with the Orioles in first place, the Rangers in first place, the trading deadline down, and now the Ravens on the field every day. And you mentioned Dennis Pitta. I want to talk about Ben Watson a little bit because clearly, Pitta wasn't on the field for large stretches of time on Monday night. But Ben Watson was catching passes and running routes, and as I tweeted, looks like they've been doing it forever.
Yeah, he's looked steady. He hasn't had a huge start to training camp, but he's looked like a dependable veteran getting ready for the start of the season, and certainly made a couple nice catches over the course of Monday night's practice. And as you mentioned, with Pitta spraining his finger and Crockett Gilmore being out with a hamstring issue right now, Watson's clearly the leader of the pack. Still have Max Williams, still have Nick Boyle, who's facing suspension, still have Darren Waller, who's also facing a suspension. So it's not as though the cupboard's completely bare behind him, but it's clear that this team brought Ben Watson in for some veteran leadership and for some more production at the tight end position, given some of the uncertainty that they had, not knowing if Pitta was going to be on the field at that point, still not knowing if Dennis Pitta is going to be on the field in a big part of what they do, and knowing that Crockett Gilmore, as talented as he is, his style of play is just, it's leading to him constantly getting nicked up, and they aren't necessarily catastrophic injuries, but he's had enough injuries to keep him off the field. So I don't expect Watson to repeat what he did in New Orleans last year, which was just a huge career season for him. And keep in mind, the Saints were replacing Jimmy Graham, who was the guy in their passing game that Drew Brees relied on the most. So, it was kind of a good fit for him to have a big season there. But that maybe he doesn't put up those kind of numbers this year, but I think he can certainly be a productive part of their passing game. And it's clear by watching Mark Trestman's offense here over the first week that the Ravens are very much looking to get their tight ends heavily involved, flanking them out, having them in motion, lots of 2 tight end sets. They have a heavy package where they have 3 tight ends on the field, which isn't uncommon, but it just shows they're a team that can do that, and you feel good about the 3 tight ends that you put on the field, unlike a lot of teams in this league. So Watson's going to be someone that I would think if the Ravens are going to have an explosive offense, the kind of passing game that they want to have, I would be surprised if he's not a significant part of that.
Defensively, we mentioned Correa and Brawls, but he is the guy who's kind of flying around the field. It's kind of weird. He's wearing number 51, the old Brendan Ibandejo jersey, and he kind of has sort of the frame and even the skin tone and the move around, but certainly from a rookie perspective, we've rarely seen a rookie come in on the defensive side and sort of fly around the way he has the first week.
And C.J. Mosley did it a couple years
Correct.
ago, but he was also their first-round pick. I mean, Kamale Correa is their second-round pick, and, I like what I see from him. And all of this is prefaced with the reality that this is the first week, and we are still more than a week out from their first preseason game. But he does look good, and as much as we were just talking about some of the skirmishes, and there's a fine line. Part of me really likes that there's a rookie who's making enough of a name for himself that he's getting under the skin of some veteran players. As I said, I think this team needs a little bit of that. This team needs a little more attitude, and they certainly need more players on defense flying to the football. Correa's had a couple interceptions over the course of the first week, and he's been pretty much the clear-cut starter at inside linebacker next to C.J. Mosley, that weak side spot since Mosley has slid to the mic, replacing Darryl Smith. So, I like what I've seen from him. Having a chance to talk to him a couple times here over the first week of camp. I mean, he likes football, and that's such a cliche thing to say, but he's someone who's really excited to be here, and you can tell this is a kid who is really excited to be in the NFL, but unlike so many rookies that you'll see, I don't get the sense that it's too big for him. I don't get the sense that he's playing being timid or tentative or anything like that. I mean, he's someone who is trying to make a name for himself, and you got to make sure he's not too overzealous, and you don't want to get anyone hurt. But I like the fact that some veteran players, including Joe Flacco, even responding to some of his physicality. But the smart thing with Correa, when Joe Flacco went over to him, he backed down then. He said, hey, that's the quarterback. What can I say? It's Joe Flacco. And I thought that was a very wise, beyond his years kind of response if you want to stay in the good graces of your football team.
We are chatting about all things Ravens who have been on the field, and at right around this point, the fatigue starts to settle in a little bit, right? And some downtime doesn't hurt. Now, keep in mind, I mean, this went on for years and years with two-a-days, right? I mean, so we would be well into two-a-days at this point. There has been some more rest for these guys. I have found the practices, the two that I've seen, to be pretty sharp for the most part. For the early going, I know we talk so much about them losing time on the field and the coaches not having the appropriate amount of time. Hey, I talked to Brian Billick and John Harbaugh about that this week and the differences from then and now, but I haven't seen these to be messy at this point, like maybe some other years we have seen that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put the offense in there for being sloppy. I mean, there have been a couple of days where they haven't looked very good.
Well, you've seen more of it than I have, so.
Yeah, right. Well, and I'm not saying it's been all bad. I'm just saying there's been some sloppiness there. But at the same time, I mean, what you mentioned as far as the challenges teams face, every team's in the same boat at this point. I mean, the preparation time, I don't think it applies as much once you get to training camp. I think most teams are at a point where they don't miss two-a-days as dramatically as they did, say, when they really made changes in 2011 when they're coming off of the lockout. But, I think it's more so the off-season time that, getting into the facility in the spring and working out more there. I think that's where teams feel they're a little more behind than they were. and then you're trying to catch up. But
well, there's also a lot of new guys here too.
No doubt about it.
More so than usual, honestly.
Well, and I think there's they need some of these young guys to step forward. They need some veteran players. Some of the veterans they brought in, like Eric Weddle, who so far so good with him. We already talked about Watson. Mike Wallace had the slow start, failing the conditioning test, but had a nice day in practice on Sunday. But there are some new parts, and they are counting on some young players to step forward. So I think the defense has been ahead of the offense to this point for what that's worth, and I don't think it's worth a whole lot. But it's still tough to really gauge what you have when you're missing some of your key pieces on both sides of the football. So until then, you put in your work. You relish the opportunity to get some younger guys some reps at some of those spots, and you kind of see what you have. But overall, I think John Harbaugh is feeling okay about what he's seen so far. Still have a long way to go, of course.
All right, Luke will be out at Oriole Park at Camden Yards as well as on the backfields in Owings Mills. No more Ravens news, right? I mean, I think we're kind of up to date and on a day-by-day basis. I know people are following you on Twitter. We're always just sort of waiting on injuries more than, someone made a great play or Justin Tucker kicked a 69-yard field goal. It's nice little quips and notes, but we're just trying to keep these guys healthy, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we mentioned Dennis Pitta with the sprained finger. Did get an update on Chris Moore, wide receiver. Not so much from John Harbaugh, but he was seen with a walking boot on his left foot. So that indicates that's a guy who's going to be out for a little while. We're not going to speculate on what it is. I mean, it could be any number of things, but
it's something that's put his foot in the boot.
Foot in the boot, right? But beyond that, I mean, really at this point, there aren't any catastrophic injuries that they've suffered in camp. Knock on wood, but it's more so waiting on Terrell Suggs. Suggs, based on what I've heard going into camp, probably getting into that territory where he's close to getting back on the field, at least on a limited basis. Brashad Perriman's still a little ways away. Steve Smith, I think if anyone read Dan Pompei's excellent piece on Bleacher Report.
I'm going to get Dan on this week, by the
way. Steve Smith's the targets for him to be ready for the start of the regular season. I'm not sure we're going to see him too soon before that. I mean, he's still someone working his way back. Had a horrible Achilles tear. It's a challenge for anyone to come back. It's a challenge certainly for a guy who's 37 years old to come back. A guy who's 37 and doesn't want to come back just for a ceremonial farewell tour. He wants to be a real player, whatever he can be at this point in time. He wants to be at his best. So I would be surprised if we see Steve Smith play in the preseason based on what I've heard, based on what others have written. I think we're just kind of waiting for each of those guys to slowly but surely get back on the field. Doomerville should be back on the field soon as well. I'd kind of put him in that Suggs camp. So, beyond that, beyond those guys that are on PUP waiting to come back to the practice field, overall just some nagging type things that the Ravens are dealing with right now.
All right, man. Busy week. Birds in first place. The other birds on the field from Owings Mills to downtown. Luke has you covered. You can find him at Baltimore Luke on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. And, of course, we'll be tweeting out of the WNST account throughout the week for so many things, including getting up on that trading deadline on baseball on Monday. It's been an exciting week so far. And we have preseason football next week even. So plenty of things happening around here. Anything you miss, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day. From anywhere in the world on your mobile devices, download the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. Morning newspaper, 7 a.m. It hits your email inbox. That's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. And don't forget, next Tuesday night, the 9th, we will be at Greenmount Station in Hampstead with head coach Brian Billick, our WNST head coach, on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. We'll be eating some crab cakes, having some cocktails, talking some football, probably working some desserts up there, as I have been known to do in one of my favorite places, Greenmount Station in Hampstead with head coach Brian Billick. It is our sort of our season kickoff. It is my 25th year in Baltimore radio, so we'll be celebrating all year long. Coming up on the 10th year of Free the Birds next month as well, so we'll be honoring that and writing about that and talking about that. I plan on writing more in season as well. Anything that is breaking news, that's big, that's impactful, that's trade-oriented or injury-oriented, will happen first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. It is our best service. We've been doing that for 10 years now. You'll get it first. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis is here on Thursday driving you home. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.